Continue.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Speaker, I rise today with humility, fear, and conviction. Conviction that American citizens have a right to choose their elected representatives. Fear that my convictions will be dismissed as naive, and humility that I am as liable to deceive myself about my first duties, where my strength comes from, and to whom I owe my loyalty, as anyone else on this floor today. But it's clear to me that my responsibility as an elected representative of my community is to say loudly and consistently, humbly and with love, that no one has the right to subvert the right of the people to choose their elected representatives. I like Chuy Garcia. I think his reasons for retiring are noble. We are not here to adjudicate the character of Chuy Garcia. I'm asking the body to consider a set of facts laid before us tonight about how he chose his successor and deprived Americans the right to choose their elected representative. Moral accusations and bitterness are not going to move this country in a stronger direction, but we can't keep bringing these same broken tools to the urgent struggle of preserving our inheritance as a nation. And so with humility, I lay out the facts. 1 week before the filing deadline, Congressman Chuy Garcia filed for re-election and submitted the necessary signatures for that petition. But 3 days before the filing deadline, he also began collecting signatures for his chief of staff, who shares his last name. Just hours before the filing deadline, Representative Garcia's chief of staff submitted the paperwork to run with at least 2,500 signatures attached to it. And Chuy Garcia's signature was the very first one listed in the petition. He had at least 3 days of work that he has publicly acknowledged, where he knew that his chief was going to be running against him. And he did not communicate his intention to retire. You don't get your cake and eat it too. If you're not going to run, you don't get to choose your successor, no matter how noble the work you have done beforehand. The day after the filing deadline, once it was clear that there would be no Democratic alternative to his chief in a D+17 seat, he announced his retirement. It's easy to get caught up in the culture of DC, of political complacency, or believing that your opponents are so broken that the ends justify the means. But you cannot win the right to represent people through subversion. All you do is engender distrust in the government and apathy in citizens of this great country. We don't have to say that a thing is perfect to say that it's worth fighting for. And in fact, we can't truly fight for a thing if we don't acknowledge its shortcomings. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
You reserve?
I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to House Resolution 878. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I respect the sponsor of this resolution and appreciate very much her work on behalf of her constituents in Southwest Washington, I cannot support this measure. My friend and classmate from the 116th Congress, Representative Chuy Garcia, embodies the highest ideals of the American dream. Born in Mexico, Representative Garcia moved to the little village neighborhood of Chicago in the 1960s and never left. After earning his citizenship in 1977, Representative Garcia graduated from college and began his career in public service as a community-based housing initiative. Since his time as a member of the Chicago City Council, the Illinois State Senate, Cook County Board of Commissioners, Congressman Chuy Garcia has served his community, the Congress, and our country with great distinction. As it relates to the matter under consideration, in nearly every election he has been a candidate, Representative Garcia has faced opposition in both primary and general elections. Representative Garcia has proven himself unafraid to campaign. He has sought other offices and come up short. During the filing period in Illinois, any qualified citizen, any qualified resident of the state could have filed to challenge Representative Garcia. In fact, Representative Garcia won a competitive primary just last cycle. Throughout his career in public service, Chuy Garcia has demonstrated a broad and deep respect for his constituents. This includes his fierce advocacy for Chicago's immigrant communities, teachers, public employees, and the economically striving and struggling among us. Representative Garcia is a dedicated public servant, and his record of accomplishment is worthy of celebration. I urge all of my colleagues to vote no on the resolution, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
We are not here to adjudicate the character or quality of work of what has gone before in the career of Representative Garcia. That is not the question at hand. No good work means that you are able to end your career with impunity and choosing your successor. This slide towards, this is not who we are as a country. People bled and died for the right to elect their own representative. And to say that you can at the last moment, submit at least 2,500 signatures when your name is at the top of the list. And to the question of legality, this is not a question of whether or not what he did was legal. This body does not adjudicate state election law. That's not what we're trying to do here. We do not choose the rules in Illinois elections. But what we can say, we cannot imagine every illegal thing, every amoral thing, and make it illegal. Legality is smaller than morality. And the question at hand is, do we condone a subversion of an election because it is playing by the rules? That's not what we're here to do. And with that, I'll reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd want to once again remind the members that any one of the citizens of this district could have filed petitions, and in fact, Mr. Garcia has faced primaries before and general elections before. But let me yield now to the distinguished gentleman from the state of Illinois, my very good friend, Representative Chuy Garcia, for 5 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. I stand here, believe it or not, with a grateful heart. Over the last several days, many of you have reached out with kindness and understanding. I appreciate your concern for me and your desire to keep our caucus united. I wasn't expecting to stand here to debate my retirement. But before any of us are members of Congress, we're husbands, we're grandfathers, we're sons, we're mothers, and we're sisters. We're regular people. But life reminds us that our jobs come second to the people waiting for us at home. Yes, sir. After nearly 40 years of public service, I decided not to seek a fifth term, and I'm proud to have served with integrity and respect. That's right. I turned 70 next spring, and I decided that it was time to dedicate more of my time to the people who have sacrificed the most so that I could serve. My wife of almost 50 years, my children, my grandchildren, the family that steadied me through victories and through heartbreak. When my daughter Rosa passed away in 2023 and left us 4 beautiful young children, it shook our entire world. Overnight, our house became a home for those kids. We did what every family does. We stepped up. We held them close and we gave them love and stability. Despite dealing with multiple sclerosis, my wife Evelyn carried the heaviest load as their day-to-day caregiver. Because of my wife, I was able to keep meeting the responsibilities of my job here and in the district. I filed to run for Congress because this work is more important than ever. And I wanted to deliver for my community and to be part, hopefully, of a new House majority next year. I followed the rules of Illinois and its election law when the ballot was open for anyone to file, as they had over the past 6 years and the 4 times that I stood for election. And contrary to claims that were made earlier today, I did not circulate any petitions that I was accused of circulating. I only circulated when I filed on the first day. But as I looked ahead, I had to be honest about what the next term would demand and what my family needed. I saw the big picture, supporting my wife as we manage her illness, taking better care of my own health, and being present for the grandson that we just adopted 2 weeks ago. It was a tough decision, but I made that choice as any husband, father, grandfather would make at that moment. I stood by my family values and as we ask others to do. Every one of us knows the pressures that come with serving here. But I hope that none of my colleagues ever face the circumstances my family has faced in the last 3 years. Meanwhile, my district, my community is under assault by our own government. And I ask you to listen. You may have seen the reports, but pictures don't convey the screams of families being separated, U.S. citizens being arrested without cause, and the indiscriminate gassing of innocent families, including a 1-year-old just a week ago. Families in my district are living with fear and trauma that no one should have to endure in our country. Last week, we returned after 54 days with the House shuttered, including a 43-day shutdown. We returned hoping for democratic unity. Therefore, I was shocked to be called out in a resolution on the House floor. I think you would agree with me that voters don't want these arguments in Congress. The voters want us to be working to help them to afford health care, rent, and child care. Colleagues, none of us wants to spend the next year trading divisive disapproval resolutions.
Mr. Speaker, I would yield an additional minute to the gentleman.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 1 minute.
Our voters don't want this either. We should not be distracted by political ploys when our constituents want us to stay focused and deliver for them. I'm going to finish my term with the same love and commitment that I brought to my first day of Congress here. When I arrived in this country as a 10-year-old, I never dreamed I'd be here. And I hope that we can all agree on this. When a colleague chooses his family, that shouldn't be a moment for division. It should be a moment for understanding and unity. One day, you might be the one making that choice, and you shouldn't have to debate it on the House floor. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
True love persists in a confidence, not in your supremacy in making a choice for your voters, but in your service and humility that they have the right to choose. And when we start making choices for people without their consent, we have walked away from the fundamentals of democracy. I feel deeply for the sacrifice that it's taken him to serve his community. That does not legitimize the way in which he left his seat and choosing his successor and refusing to be forthright with his constituents. And to the question of primary challenges, in both the 2020 and the 2022 election, as I've seen in reporting, Chuy Garcia carried 100% of the primary. That does not sound like a whole lot of a primary challenge when you're carrying 100% of the votes in the primary. That doesn't mean that he was not chosen in that, but you can't walk away from a commitment to allowing voters a choice and clarity on what you're going to be doing. And with that, I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you. I would like to yield to my friend, the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Espiat.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for?
For 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Thank you. Since 2019, I have been proud to call the gentleman from Illinois both a colleague and a trusted friend. During the Build Back Better negotiations, we stood shoulder to shoulders to defend immigrant communities when it mattered the most. That is who Chuy Garcia is. He leads with conviction, courage, integrity, even when he stands alone. Chuy Garcia came up during the era of the late and great Harold Washington in Chicago, who took down the political machine. It was Chuy Garcia who stood next to our other colleague, Luis Gutierrez, in his home as two young men when Luis Gutierrez's home was firebombed. His home was firebombed. And Chuy Garcia was the person standing next to former Congressman Luis Gutierrez. An immigrant from Mexico and the son of a bracero, Chuy Garcia has spent 45 years as an organizer, public servant, and a coalition builder who never loses sight of the people he serves. He has been a steadfast champion for dignity, equity, justice across Chicago. He stepped out of this race for one reason, and one reason only: his family. We often hear in these hollow hallways of Congress the word family values, and it is often used with hypocrisy. But here we have a person that's really standing up for his grandchild, for his...
Speaker, I'd like to yield an additional 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 2 minutes.
Here you have someone that's standing up for his grandchild, for his ill wife, for his community. He's standing up for family values, and yet he has to stand here and defend himself. His decision to step down is very personal, and his decades of service speak for themselves. We are grateful for his unwavering commitment to public service. At a moment where some are working overtime to protect the wealthy and gut health care for working families, we should stand together, united, to defend affordable health care. That is the issue that we should be talking about here tonight. We should be standing together to talk about how we're going to lift the least among us and make it easier for them. That's what we should be talking about here tonight. Nearly 20 million people are at risk of losing coverage, and that should be our priority. We call Chuy, both myself and Lu Correa, we call ourselves the three amigos because we have so much in common, although I'm from New York, he's from Illinois, and Lou is from California. The word amigo means friend. It has been lost in the journey. The meaning of that word has been lost, and I may add, maybe mutilated. But I'm here to call Chuy tonight mi gran amigo. And I yield back, Mr.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
I'll reserve.
The gentlewoman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to now yield 2 minutes to the gentle lady from Vermont, Ms. Bayland.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of my colleague, Congressman Chuy Garcia, who is my seatmate in Judiciary. Chuy is someone who is always looking out for the working people of this country. Chuy is always the one in committee who is thinking, how is this going to affect the people back home in my neighborhoods? For 45 years, this man has worked relentlessly for his communities that he serves. His steadfast dedication to community has been on full display this year in the midst of the barbaric assaults that they have endured in Chicago. And as Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino has indiscriminately launched chemical agents in residential neighborhoods and kidnapped people off the streets, the people of Illinois' 4th District have had a strong champion in Chuy Garcia, standing alongside them every step of the way to demand justice. And that's how he fights for not just everyone in his district, but for people across this country. Because he is a man of principle, and he is a man of morals, and it is so disheartening to see his name dragged through the mud today. When federal agents kidnap staffers off a local elected official off the streets, Chuy and his team were there demanding his release. He goes where he needs to go to stand up for his people. And isn't that what we all want from our elected officials? Now, I want to acknowledge that, yes, indeed, our democracy is corrupted, and it is rigged against working people. But it's not because of Chuy Garcia. Chuy has fought for working people his entire life, and he has been fearless in voting to stand up to the mega corporations that are screwing us over and the big banks that don't give a damn about us. I urge my colleagues to keep all of these things in mind.
The gentlewoman is recognized for an additional minute.
I want you to think about the totality of this man's life and what he has done in service, not just to Illinois, but the people of this country. And I urge my colleagues to keep this in mind. This is not a game. It's a man's life. Please consider that as we think about this resolution. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
This is certainly not a game. This is certainly not a short strategy. It is long work to remain committed to the primacy of Americans' right to choose their elected representatives. Nothing validates the choice to subvert an election. Not the trespasses of an administration, not the long and noble work of a public servant, not the valid and unknowable bitterness of a family's suffering, not fidelity to identity politics. Nothing validates subverting an election, and we are not here to adjudicate, as I've said, the measure of Chuy Garcia's work or his character. The question is, do you have the right to choose your successor? I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, may I inquire as to the amount of time left?
The gentleman from New York has 15 minutes remaining.
Very good. Thank you, sir. I would now like to yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Kamala Radow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of Chuy Garcia and against this resolution. And I am, in fact, appalled at the hubris behind all of this. If this is not a question of legality, if this is not a question of state law, then what is it a question of? I was in Chicago with Congressman Chuy Garcia when hearings were held about the inhumane and barbaric treatment of Chicagoans across his district and other districts by this administration and by ICE. And I saw his conviction, his commitment, his love for not just his district, but the city in which he was born and lives. This is a man who is a legend. He is a legend to his district, and he is a legend in this Congress. And I don't understand why we are having to debate him. This is character assassination. My question is this the most significant aversion that has happened this year? We have an administration that is starving poor children. We have an administration that is involved in unauthorized strikes in countries around the globe. We are in the midst of fighting for survivors by getting the Epstein files released. We are in the fight of our lives to make sure that Americans can afford health care that they deserve. That is what we should be debating. Those are issues that are far more pressing and critical to Americans. I was home in my district this weekend. Not one person asked me about Chuy Garcia. Not one person in my district or in my state. We have to worry about our own districts. Isn't that what people say? What's happening in your district? Worry about your own district.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield an additional minute.
The gentlewoman is recognized for an additional minute.
So I would just ask that we get back to that. And I'm going to have to say, this Democratic intra-party fighting is not what any of us want, and it's not what the American people deserve. And I would hope that we would get back to focusing on the issues that are most critical. And if any of us have an issue with what's going on in somebody else's district, we should have the decency and respect to go to them and ask them about what's going on in their district before we do all of this kind of character assassination on this House floor. And with that, I yield.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
There's a famous saying in Baptist circles, if you don't kill your sin will kill you. Nobody wants to see anybody get hurt, but there are natural consequences, and the consequences of subverting an election and choosing your successor are a slide towards a very ugly future for our country. And there's an argument that's been made that they don't know about it, so it's not wrong. That's not true. That's not true. We know about it. We know about it. And that conveys on us an accountability, not just when it's politically convenient to condemn someone, but when it's in your own family. That is the point. That is the point. That when there is a spade, you call it a spade, whether it hurts or not. And you have to have confidence that Americans will make the choice for themselves. That is the whole point of this experiment in democracy. I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Oregon, Ms. Salinas.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of my friend and colleague, Congressman Garcia. Over the past 3+ years, I've had the pleasure of working with Chuy Garcia. I've known him to be a dedicated public servant, committed to serving his community and his country, day in and day out. He's shown up for his constituents and for the American people. I want to contrast this with Speaker Johnson, who for the last month and a half kept the House out of session, who stopped this body from working on behalf of the people who sent us here and has manufactured a healthcare crisis. We just ended the Republicans' government shutdown, and this is our first order of business? We need to get back to work to address the issues impacting the American people. We should be united in addressing Republicans' looming healthcare crisis and the rising cost of living. This debate does nothing to lower costs for people in Oregon or across this country. This is a debate that should be held by Congressman Garcia's constituents, not by members of Congress who do not represent them. We have more important work to do than to express displeasure at a member of Congress who has spent his entire life serving the people of Illinois and people across this country. Now, please, let's get back to the real work on behalf of the American people. I urge my colleagues to reject this reprimand. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
The point is well made that Americans are suffering. A non-payment on utility bills, people having their cars repossessed, people losing their businesses, people going without meals. That's in my community, and that's real. And we do not dutifully serve the long work of building a self-determining country by turning our constituents into petitioners who would only demand free things from us, a relief from this pressure of consolidation, corporate power. No, we also have to stand before them with honor and confidence and respect in their ability to choose their elected representatives for themselves. I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 2 minutes.
I'm so proud to stand here today to talk about one of the most important leaders in the city of Chicago for many, many years, helping people after person, making sure that his community and our community has been safe, to stand up and fight for the people of the city of Chicago, a city that my colleague does not really understand the kind of faith that they have in Chuy Garcia all of these years. And for someone who doesn't know about the city of Chicago and the role that he has played, to find some outside idea that he has somehow cheated the city of Chicago or the people of the city of Chicago, are you kidding? There has not been one single person that has stood up in Chicago and said that there should be some sort of punishment for our great friend. I mean, he has been there every day of the year, helping people, every day of the most recent years, helping people, because we know that people have been in Chicago trying to take away people's lives, taking them out of the country, people who are fine, wonderful people in the city of Chicago. I say shame on you for deciding that this is the issue that you, who have no idea about the role that Chuy Garcia has played in the city of Chicago and continues to play in the city of Chicago. This should be diminished
The gentlewoman's
right now,
time has
and
expired.
I yield.
The gentlewoman yields, and members are reminded to direct their comments toward the chair. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
there are claims that this was not the work that we were sent to do here, then what gives us the right to be here if not being sent here? There is a premise here. We have to be endowed with trust, and that has to be reciprocal with our voters. And I would argue that there is a very loud demand, a fervent, clear call by Americans right now for accountability and transparency. And it's not just about the Epstein files, it's all of it. They want us to stop this fight and be honest and deliberate and respectful, to humbly serve. That is what real leadership is. It is humility and service, not choosing for them what would be best for them. That I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to now yield to my friend, the distinguished gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, for 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the Honorable Congressman Joe Morelli. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong defense of the great character of a loving friend, father, husband, and brother, Congressman Chuy Garcia. My friends, there are moments in the nation's history when a single life stands up and declares, without arrogance and without apology, that freedom must mean something for everybody or it means nothing at all. Congressman Chuy Garcia is such a man. He is in every profound and dangerous sense a freedom fighter, not in the kind fashioned in myth or marble, but the kind born of neighborhoods where dreams have been bruised and people still need to rise. And yet people still rise because of a congressman like Chuy Garcia, the kind who understands that the struggle for the human dignity is never finished and never optional. Chuy Garcia's life is stitched together with the same thread that carried our greatest fighters forward, the belief that one does not have to accept the world as it is, but he glimpses into what the world ought to be. That's leadership. Leadership is not a performance. It's not a posture. A way of standing with the vulnerable, a way of insisting that compassion is not weakness, that justice is not a luxury, and that democracy is not a spectator sport, but a lifelong calling. Beside me is a picture that warmed my heart from childhood. This is Congressman Chuy Garcia, then campaigning with the great Harold Washington, the former congressman from the 1st Congressional District. Chuy brought the African American and Mexican community together. There was a time before the word Hispanic was created. We knew Chuy as a Mexican American. Chuy walked hand in hand with us in Chicago. Chuy Garcia in 1997, while he was the state senator, serving alongside then Senator Barack Obama, he was the chair of the Black Caucus of the Illinois State Senate. He has walked arm in arm with the African American community.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Mr. Speaker, would you please give the gentleman 1 more minute?
The gentleman is recognized for an additional minute.
Not as a visitor, not as a distant ally, but as a brother in the same long struggle for liberation. He understands that the battles of the South Side echo the battles of Little Village, that the pain of displacement, disenfranchisement, and dismissal does not respect ethnic boundaries, and that our triumphs, when we dare to claim them together, can shake the foundation of this nation. He has marched with us, organized with us, fought alongside us because he knows that our destinies are intertwined. And so today, let us honor the courage of a man who has refused to be coward, that has refused to bow to power or silenced by cynicism, a man who reminds us that to lead is not merely to occupy an office, but to carry a people, a man who teaches us that loyalty to the truth, to the community, to the least among us is the highest form of patriotism. Let Chuy Garcia examples lead us out of our complacency and to a greater level of integrity and to a higher calling. Let this unyielding spirit remind us that America becomes America only when ordinary people dare to demand the extraordinary.
The gentleman's time has expired.
I yield.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from New York. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
I can reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would now like to yield to the distinguished gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Ramirez, for 2 minutes.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to start by clarifying something that was said on the record. The sponsor of the bill, of the resolution, is stating that Chuy Garcia has won his primaries with 100% of the vote. All you have to do is go to Board of Elections or Ballot Ready and recognize that in 2024, in his last election, his opponent got 30% of the vote. So I just want to make sure that facts matter here. And I want to make sure that when there's misinformation, that we clarify that. So let me go ahead and say, in a moment when so many members of Congress have conceded their power to Donald Trump, voting rights are on the line, super PACs continue to buy congressional seats, and the representation of Black and brown working families is threatened, this resolution is nothing more than a cheap political stunt pulled from the playbook of some of my Republican colleagues. You want proof? Some of the ones that have been suppressing the most votes have been clapping every time she speaks. It is a do-nothing resolution that targets a leader who has been holding the line in defense of democracy. Someone who is not beholden to super PACs, like foreign lobbies, or big oil, like the American Petroleum Institute. Someone who has voted against bills like the SAVE Act, which endangers the voting rights of women in our country. Someone who voted against the Laken Riley Act, which allows the persecution and racial profiling of Latinos by ICE agents. Someone that voted against the recent Republican continuing resolution, which did not protect affordable health care and provided a slush fund for senators investigated for their role in the insurrection. Chuy Garcia has stood his ground for working families and our democracy in moments when others have not, including the sponsor of this resolution, disapproval, who has opened the doors to authoritarianism by the way she votes. You don't have to agree with how the events of his decision to step down unfolded to recognize that this resolution is misguided and disingenuous. Disapproving of his actions while you allow big money in politics, outside spending in elections, and rampant corruption to go unchallenged or uninterrupted is the height of hypocrisy.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, may I inquire as to the amount of time remaining in the debate?
The gentleman has 4 minutes remaining.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield an additional minute to Ms. Ramirez.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional minute.
Thank you. So while we need to hold each other to high standards, we do, we also need to reform a system that too often makes it nearly impossible to ensure working people like Chuy Garcia, like me and so many others here, are well represented in the face of moneyed interests set on their destruction. So I want to invite you today to vote no on this performative, bad-intentioned resolution and join me in getting dark money out of politics, protecting and expanding the voting rights in America, and fighting for authentic representation with all of our communities. Vote no. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
While there are many ways to litigate many of the votes, the question at hand is what gives you the right to represent a community? It is the choice of your voters. Nothing gives you the right to choose your successor. And we cannot walk down this path. When we stand and say that everything around us is bad, it risks us conforming to that wrongness and orienting our policy around it. This is not a false choice. This is a false choice to say I can either attack here or I can attack here. You can pursue wherever you disagree. But we also have to call a spade, and that's what this is about. Accountability. I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Are you prepared to close? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned earlier in the debate, I respect certainly the sponsor of this resolution. We are fellow appropriators, and I observe firsthand her energy and commitment in serving the people of Southwest Washington. But this resolution is wrong. It shouldn't be before us. The House has so much work we need to be doing, addressing the affordability crisis in America, saving health care, and fighting the cost of the actual corruption happening on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. Let's get back to work. I commend my dear friend, Representative Garcia, for his long and distinguished tenure in public life and as a devoted public servant. I wish him and his family the very best as they begin the next chapter of their lives, and I urge my colleagues to reject this ill-conceived resolution. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
Look, we're not called to anything more than walking with humility, to love justice, to work diligently. And Chuy has worked diligently. Nothing in that legitimizes the choice to choose a successor, to support gathering over 2,500 signatures, to wait for days when you knew that you were not going to run for re-election and ensure that your chief of staff would be your successor. That is not the path our country can stand on. A country that refuses to acknowledge wrongdoing when it happens is got bad things in store for it. And I humbly ask my colleagues to support this resolution. And with that, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back.